Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Awakening Chats. I'm here today to talk about Maya Mire, a book which has really touched my heart. It's a book very close to my heart. It's a spiritual journey into cosmic truth and the dawning of a new world. And I'm very honored to be joined by the guest, Paul Nugent. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Jack, and it's lovely to be able to speak with you again, and particularly, I suppose, to speak about Maya Mire.
Yes, yes. So I want to ask you why the title Maya Mire. But actually, before I do that, something I always forget is
Mm.
to talk to the listeners, people watching. I would get too engrossed talking to you.
Can't
Yeah.
ignore them, Jack.
No, I can't. I want to thank them for tuning in, you, the listener, for tuning in. And I want you to tell you to write in the comments, please, what your experiences are. We're going to answer questions afterwards. Paul will be answering them personally as well, hopefully. And I'll be checking in there. And to share this as well, because if you get something from it, Paul's doing this for no cost. Obviously, he wants you to buy the book. But sharing it is a nice way to say thank you. Active engagements, they help boost our social algorithm. So that's all an act of service. All right, I think that's enough of a promo. Let's get on to promoting the book. So
I'm,
why this
I'm,
title?
all in, Jack.
Yeah, so why Maya Maya?
Why Maya Mire? Well, firstly, as you can see from the title, it was from the cover of the book. It's M-A-Y-A as for Maya, and then M-I-R-E. M-A-Y-A is a Sanskrit word for illusion. And Maya, M-I-R-E, is as in quagmire. And I think the title came to me one morning when I was out on my bicycle. Many things come to me when I'm out riding my bike in the morning. And just sort of churning through these things. And we're talking several years ago. In fact, the first part of the book was written, I think it was in 2008. So it goes back at least, 15 odd years. And it just sort of came to me as a thought, as a concept. I'm not even sure I thought of it as being the title for the book, but I just like to play on words. We're all living in this, quagmire of illusion. We have, all the consequences that exist in our world as a result of that. And yet, if we could better understand our predicament here on Earth in the vastness of the cosmos, then we would be able to see through the illusion and make it the kind of world that I think we all would love to live in. So that's the meaning of the title.
And the picture behind you, which is the front cover I did
Well, the
use.
picture behind me actually, it is an interesting story to it. Once I found a publisher for the book, which wasn't easy, but it was a great, I suppose, feather in my cap, at least for me anyway. And the publisher then wanted me to, pick out a cover. And there's a company called Shutterstock, I'm sure you've heard of it, that I think they've got over 1 million images, and they wanted me to sort of find something that would, perhaps represent the concept of the book. And I have to say that there was absolutely nothing there that resonated at all. It was all in a way sort of just, I don't know, too fake, I suppose. And then I thought to myself, well, why don't I sort of design my own cover using a piece of artwork or something that I'd made? And I experimented with that, but there was nothing that really seemed terribly suitable. And then one morning I came in for my bicycle ride, and this wall hanging Co and I purchased when we went to Japan many years ago, I think 2005, made by a Japanese artist, I suppose. He makes his own dyes, it's linen. We particularly liked it when we were there in Kyoto, in 2005. And I thought, well, that, might make a suitable cover for the book. And so I hung it. It was at the time hanging in a narrow passageway. There was no way to take a picture of it. So I put it in the bedroom. And beside my bed was my bedside lamp that has a red lampshade, and that was still on. And it just cast this sort of, orange or reddish hue over the over the wall hanging, completely random. I mean, not deliberately done at all. And anyway, I liked very much the finished image, and I had to sort of touch it up a little bit because there's a seam running down the middle. It's one of these things that you put in doorways that you pass through. Anyway, I sent it in to the publisher, and their cover designer worked with it, and I was very happy with it. So that's the explanation. The wall hanging, as you can see, is behind me right now. That's the story of it. And well, actually, it's not the full story because there's another good part of it. But the publisher was saying, "Well, Paul, you have to get permission from the artist to use this wall hanging." And I was thinking, well, goodness gracious, is he really going to care? Is he going to know? And more importantly, how on earth are we going to track him down? And anyway, I went online and I found a company that sold his artwork. I mean, he must be now well into his 70s. And I reached out to them in Japan. Fortunately, they spoke English. And they said, well, I'm afraid we've got no idea of tracking this man down. He's got no website, no email address, didn't even have a phone number. And but fantastically, Yuriko, when we were there in 2005, she'd taken a photograph of the man's shop. And through that, we were able to sort of get a phone number for him and called him up. Yuriko had to speak to him, of course, in Japanese. And he said, absolutely, he was thrilled. Go ahead, please do whatever you want. So that was another nice thing that happened. But he does get credit on the back of the book.
Okay, all right. Wonderful. So, for people that don't know, because it's difficult to know how to play these conversations because many of the audience know everything about Dr. King and the Aetherius Society, and many people, some people might be to the teachings and Dr. King and the whole shebang. So, could you just do that for the beginner's guide to the book and Dr. King and the
Speak
teachings?
about Dr. King, who he was.
Yes, that would be a good place to start, I think, because that's
Sure,
really the
sure.
book is
He was a
about
very
you, but even more about him. No?
well, actually, no. I mean, the second part of the book, which I always say is the main part of the book because it is totally about George King and the not only the messages which he brought through, but the whole body of work of the Aetherius Society, which he manifested, created. It's such an integral part of great change. It's the most integral part of great changes that our whole world is going through. So very briefly, Dr. George King was English. He was born in Shropshire in 1919. He was psychically gifted as a child, had some very outstanding experiences. And then 20 years later, in 1939, along came the Second World War. So 20 years of age, single man, he was prime fighting age. However, his conscience knew, his intuition knew, we're, we're not here to kill. That thou shalt not kill is a law greater than mankind. It's a great cosmic spiritual truth. He honoured that, and yet at the same time, he knew that obviously Hitler and the rise of Nazism and the threat to Britain and Europe was a great danger that needed to be, one needed to stand against it. And so he joined the fire service in London, went through the Blitz, which was this bombing of London. I always think that, I mean, it's strange that this great cosmic avatar, this adept, who was inhabiting this one city in the world that, so to speak, by chance, by accident, bombs, a war arose and bombs were dropped on this one avatar who was living in this city at that time. I mean, it's rather like, I mean, when the more one knows about George King, how Herod wanted to kill all babies, or all children under the age of 3 or 4, whatever it was, at the time of Jesus's birth. Was this a manipulation by darker forces? I'm getting quite
That's
deep here.
interesting. Yeah.
That engineered this bombing of this city where he was working, not only working, but working as a farmer. I mean, in very dangerous situations to, rescue elderly people, children, whatever, out of these crumbling buildings. That's very strange. I also think it's strange since I started with that, but how the last great pandemic, the Spanish flu, arose right at the end of World War One, when of course his mother was pregnant with this intelligence about to be born, and the people most threatened by that, or most at danger, most at risk of this Spanish flu, so called, were pregnant women. And so it just seems strange. Was this another manipulation
That's
to
interesting. Yeah.
take him out at such an early stage? These are very interesting things to think about. But anyway, coming back to him, so he was this young man working in London, well, in fire service during the war, and it obviously had a very devastating effect upon him. I mean, the whole inhumanity of war, the madness of war, and it caused him to, question how we should be living, what life is about. As I say, he'd come from a very psychic childhood. He knew that there were other dimensions, so to speak. There was far more than this sort of very rather ignorant perspective of humanity. And so he began to practice various forms of yoga, which I guess was unusual in the 40s and 50s in London. And he did it with incredible diligence and determination. He was practicing primarily yoga breathing and mantra up to 8 hours a day over a 10-year period. So he was incredibly intense. Having, from practicing yoga myself, as we all do in the Aetherius Society, but doing mantra and breathing exercises, and particularly prayers of the 12 blessings, I always used to do sort of about 2 hours every morning, and that
Which
second
is
hour,
good going.
oh yes, and that second hour was always far more intense than that first hour.
Yeah.
But I've never done 8 hours, and I can only begin to imagine what it must be like, how deep one must go in terms of sort of spiritual insight and realization by doing yogic practice for a consecutive period of 8 hours. Um,
I've often thought that as well. If I could do
it's,
just, if I could do that one time, 4 hours or 5 hours in a row, that would.
and I think it's exponential. So to be doing that over a 10-year period, well, the consequence was that a force that we all have called the Kundalini in the base of the spine rose through a channel in the spine called the Sushumna channel, opening the chakras, the psychic centers. And he was able to fully raise this force of Kundalini into the Christ center and the crown chakra, and attain the state of cosmic consciousness, known as Samadhi in the East. So he was able to do this at some point in the early 1950s, when the world had gone beyond the Second World War into the Cold War, where we weren't just now testing atom bombs, we started to test hydrogen bombs. And it was also a time when flying saucers were very commonly sighted. It's when the term flying saucer actually became coined. That was in 19. An American aviator called Kenneth Arnold saw several discs skipping over in the horizon, over the landscape. He thought they looked like upturned saucers, hence the term flying saucers. So that was the state of the world. That was the mix. It was the Cold War. It was flying saucer sightings, and it was this individual George King, who was able to attain a very elevated state of consciousness. And I guess to sort of tie those things together, or why flying saucers were so commonly cited, is because our understanding in the Aetherius Society and, well, in metaphysical circles, we've destroyed our world before through the intense misuse of atomic power, previously Atlantis, and before that Lemuria. We even take it further back to Maldek, which is such an important part of this whole story, a planet we destroyed through the intense misuse of atomic power. So these beings from other worlds, from other dimensions of those worlds, had seen humanity go down this route. I'll say that because you're English and I'm English, but we say route here in America. They'd seen us go this way before. And they were able to use George King as a medium, as a channel, to be able to communicate this far more important message that, humanity was coming to a crossroads. Either we destroy ourselves or we become aware of who and what we really are in the vastness of creation, both in a spiritual sense and cosmic sense. So he was contacted in 1954 by an intelligence, we believe, coming from the higher dimensions of Venus, going by the name of Aetherius. And that is how the Aetherius Society began. And over the following, 43 years, they communicated through him. But for the following roughly 25 years, I think, he would go into this positive yogic samadhic trance, and these intelligences from higher dimensions of the planets within some of the planets in our own solar system, communicated through him and gave this incredibly profound and important message. So that, I guess, in a nutshell, is George King.
I asked you an impossible question, didn't I, to sum up the life of probably the man who's lived the fullest life I've ever heard of. But you were with him right at the end of his life. But could you think back to the very beginning, the first time you met him? Could you give us a little bit of sense of what that was like?
Well, I can. I actually only ever knew George King, the master, as we call him, because he was a master, over the age of 70. I came across the Aetherius Society when I was roughly, I suppose, in my early to mid-20s in London. And George King was primarily living in the United States. He tended to come back most summers for a few months. And I'd found the Aetherius Society probably in about 1983, 1984. Was, rather intrigued by it, and gradually sort of got more and more involved. I didn't get entirely involved. I didn't become a member until 1986. But I joined I attended a pilgrimage, I should say, in Holdstone Down, what we call a holy mountain in southern England, in Devonshire, for July the 8th of that year, 1980, where George King was present. He'd arrived in the United States, I think, about 10 days earlier, from the United States. And so I was curious about this individual. Everybody in the Aetherius Society, spoke about him, what an incredible human being he was, what a master, etc. So I was rather sort of intrigued and fascinated, and of course, never having met him. And I remember we'd been on the mountain for about an hour or so, this huge circle. I think there were about 200 people. And I remember he walked his way around, and he stopped. He was stopping intermittently, but he stopped about a yard away from where I was. And I thought we had to do mantra with our eyes closed. So my eyes were closed, but at the same time sort of squinting to try and look at him. And then he walked on. But that was the first time I actually saw him. I continued to sort of, investigate the Aetherius Society and participate in their services. And it just resonated more and more. So the following year, in 1986, I became a member of the Aetherius Society, still not having actually formally met George King. And then I joined the staff. And then in 1989, we were informed that it was extremely unlikely that the master would ever be coming back to England, primarily for reasons of ill health, and that it was, questionable as to how much longer he was actually going to live. And, we were being advised to go and meet him. And I think I was the first to sign up. And in May the 6th of 1989, I went to the American headquarters with a wonderful fellow staff team member, Pete Higginson, and primarily to meet, in my case, the master for the first time. Pete obviously had met him several times, doing quite well. And he was in Santa Barbara when we arrived. He has a private home in Santa Barbara, about 100 miles north of Hollywood. And so, but we were told he would be coming back in a few days' time. And so, there was this tremendous sort of excitement and anticipation that I was finally going to meet the master, who who had become so important, so instrumental in my whole life. He'd given my life the meaning that I'd been looking for over the previous, 5, 6 years. And anyway, a few days later, his car he did arrive from Santa Barbara. I remember Pete and I were in the parking lot to sort of greet him, but it was evident, he didn't want any greeting. He knew we were there. He gave us a sort of faint wave and went inside to his house. And he was going to take us on the tour of the American headquarters. And it was just this moment of in a way, it was a moment of love. It was an expression. I suppose, in a very sort of strange way, it might be like an orphaned child meeting a biological parent. I mean, it was someone about whom I thought so much, who meant so much to me. And you'd heard so much about, and so to finally be there and to shake his hand and just find this, I would say, rather graceful path, not distant, not remote, just sort of welcoming and kind, and in so many other ways familiar. But and so that's really how that first encounter was. I mean, filled with sort of excitement and anticipation, and yet a sort of resolution and knowingness. And anyway, I mean, it was a huge moment because, as I said, at long last, I'd met my master. It was sort of, in that sense, job done. And he took us on a tour of the property, and it was just sort of being in his presence, being in his aura was exciting. It was elevating. It was, one doesn't well, you see, I think in my case, because I think a lot of people sort of first meet the master without several years going beforehand, anticipation, expectation, and a sort of growing understanding of who he was. So in a way, I've been able to build him up, and without it sort of just being a casual, haphazard encounter. And I remember he took us into one of the holiest rooms on the planet, actually. What's where all the tapes, it's called tape storage, where all the tapes of all the transmissions that he brought through and all the lectures he'd given, these are all real tapes, rows and rows of them, and in boxes in this rather small room that had no windows. It was just an air conditioner in there. And I remember as he unlocked as he opened the door, he said, "This is the greatest occult library in the world." And I remember thinking, wow, it is. And I sort of thinking I should say something in return. And I said, "Money couldn't buy it, Master." And he looked at me, and I remember he said with a big smile on his face, "It's not for sale." And as I recall in the book, that was really, I suppose, my first rather short but enjoyable conversation with the master. And so that, to answer your question, was it felt like that in a way the ice had been broken. As I say, job done. I met my master. There was something, and I'm sure this is the case for people such as yourself and all those who've come into the Aetherius Society. I mean, obviously, it must be a huge wish. It felt for all those people who didn't meet the master, but it really feels, I suppose, something of tremendous or of karmic importance. I think that there's a sort of, because it created a link, and I'm not saying that link isn't there, because my wife and many people have dreams of the master. There's still connection. The master's gone nowhere, and there's that wonderful, most reassuring line from the master Jesus in the 12 blessings. Blessed are they who have not seen, because their faith is, is what will carry them forward. The master is there will come to anyone, or in a dream, or in a sense. One doesn't have to physically meet him. It's far more, what place does the master hold in your heart, in your mind, in your thoughts? How much is he a driving figure in your life? That is far more valuable than the physical meeting. But I'm answering your question, Jack. You asked me what it was like, and trying to tell you what it was like.
No, it's beautifully written the way you put together the book. And I was just in England for the Carmelite sessions actually, and I met Pete Higginson and his wife Pat Higginson, who were
Right.
mentioned in the book. I think Pat introduced you to the society in the very beginning.
No, you're talking about a different Pat, actually.
Is it?
Uh,
Ah, okay. She was the
yes, it
secretary
wasn't
as
Pat
well. I thought there
Higginson.
was going to be.
No, it wasn't Pat Higginson. It was
Ah,
actually a woman called Pat Robgent, um, who, and again, I mean, the master. It's one of the quotes I use in the book. Um, this was one morning in Santa Barbara when I'd rushed through his living room, or moved too quickly anyway. And he came into the kitchen and he said, "Why are you rushing? There's no rush. There's only God's time, which is now, and it's all happened anyway." It's an incredible statement. And the older I get, I suppose, in life, the more one begins to realize, in a sense, it has all happened anyway. I mean, there is nothing by chance. Things all happen for a reason, and it's a sort of fascinating sort of mystery as to how all this works, how it can be so. But Pat Robgent, who introduced me to the Aetherius Society, and again, without giving too much away, it's not a spoiler, but it's in the book. She saw this advertisement in the local job agency. This must have been in about 1984, I suppose, for a part-time secretary, and it said, applicants must have an interest in wine because it was for a wine company. Well, Pat was a teetotaler. She got absolutely no interest in wine whatsoever, but she felt, she felt that she needed to apply for this job. She didn't tell me this until 30 years later when we were having tea in a cafe in London. But something compelled her to apply for that job. Um, and why was that? My employer, Nicholas Belfridge, was a wonderful influence. In fact, I've sort of reverse engineered the fact that it was necessary for me to fail my A levels, such that I took the path in life that I wound up taking. Because if I'd passed my A levels, I'd have gone to study textile design and textile management in the north of England, which would have taken me to Leeds, not where I wound up in London finding the Aetherius. Although in saying that, I mean, to use one of my favourite quotes from Shakespeare, from Hamlet, there's a divinity which shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. Even if I had gone to study textiles at Leeds University, I'm sure that karma would have created a situation whereby I would have found the Aetherius Society. So Pete, who was a wonderful companion for me. I didn't really know him at all. I don't think I'd really sort of said more than about 3 words to Pete prior to going to LA with him in
he's a quiet
1989.
fella too.
He's a quiet fellow, yeah.
But it was great seeing him and Richard Lawrence as well, and speaking to you now, because I get the feeling of even speaking to you is a privilege, because you won't be around forever and you'll
Well,
be
it's
one of
very
the
true,
apostles.
Jack. I'm glad you sort of can recognize that. And I say that obviously without any sense or trace of self-importance at all. There is none. Um, but however, I mean, it was, I had a very similar feeling, I suppose, when I did go to LA, and we were met at the airport by Charles Abrahams. I mean, this iconic figure, and Monique, the master's wife, Monique, formerly Monique Noppe, and Aren Noppe, and Edna Spencer, and Al Young, and Ellie Abrahams. And one was meeting literally iconic figures, and I think it's not important to think of them in that way, but I certainly hope, and actually believe that history, true history, we're talking time. It may take, hopefully, it won't take hundreds of years, but it might. But in that sense, these are biblical figures of modern times, and we're all flawed. We're all very human, but and it's only because we knew George King. I think somewhere in his teachings, if we hadn't known him, we'd have been ordinary people. We'd have been salesmen, teachers, and it's certainly true of my own life. I'd have been working somewhere in the wine trade, and my life would have been extremely ordinary and more or less totally forgettable.
But
Um,
do you think you have a greater appreciation for Dr. King, and as time goes, you already had a huge appreciation for him before, but it's like being on a mountain and moving gradually away. You see the height and the accomplishments, and your own life and your perspective and experiences, this sense of scale and the
I think we're still not too close, but we're still very close to the master. Perhaps because we still have people who were there, who knew him. And you're right. It's distance that allows us to appreciate these people. And I mean, Christ was not recognized. Well, it was a very different situation, I suppose. But those were around him, who we now know were extremely advanced people, but the ordinary people who were around him were literally ordinary people. But the more you stand back and sort of read about some of these, biblical figures, they were, well, I'd say on the one hand, they were enormously privileged. I'd say on the other hand, that they carried this tremendous responsibility. And I think that, that is extraordinarily and extremely incumbent on all of us who did know George King to keep this memory alive, to carry forward his great teachings and missions. And I mean, one can't take it for granted that fortunately, through the Great Legacy Project, they've been transcribed, they've been recorded, they've been archived, they're there, but we don't want them to be sort of buried for a period and then be rediscovered. We want to be able to hopefully allow them to be found and recognized and appreciated in this age, in this exact time. And it's far from being easy. It's far from being easy, but then that's, I suppose, where faith and commitment and diligence and all of these qualities come in. We must keep the faith, so to speak. And it's also a very big. I'd say it's the primary reason why I wrote Maya Mire. It was a huge relief to me to get that book finished, an even bigger relief in a way to get it published. Now the challenge is getting it read, and that seems the biggest challenge of all.
that's why we're here to do, promoting it. But just
Thank you, Jack.
that sense of perspective and the things and the sacrifices you've involved. I was in Carmelite, heard the Carmelite lectures. As I say,
Mm,
I've been a member for 5 years, so I was thinking next logical step, I should go for staff membership. I'm a close worker, and it's something
mm,
you say here, and then we realise from talking to you now that you took that step before you'd even met. Thought staff membership was, yeah, you volunteer your time and you commit to so many hours a week, but I didn't realise it was all your time outside of work. Basically, it's
yeah,
every evening, every weekend. It's a
it is. In your situation, obviously, you're a proud parent, which changes the dynamics a bit. I think I'm going to say these words. I think it needs to be a burning desire. I think it needs to be, if you like, a soul-driven need. Um, well, at least that was certainly my own experience, my own sense. I think I'd have committed my life to anything. In fact, I was looking to commit my life to something for whatever reason. You can say because of past life soul experience. So I was looking. You could say I was looking for George King. I was looking for the Aetherius Society. I was looking to a cause that I could commit myself to utterly, really. And it says in the ninth freedom, bravery is the first freedom. I mean, you've got to be um, you've got to be, as I say, soul driven. You've got to have this. It's this urge. It's this calling. It's this need to join stuff. I'm not, trying to put anybody off, but I'm speaking to those people who do have that sense of calling and commitment. I mean, it was for me. I think it was at the end of the day, Jack. At the end of the day, everything's about love. Everything's about love. It's what it's all about. See, it's the only thing it's about. And love is care. Love is care. It's care for the world. It's care for life. It's it's care for everything. Because behind it, you can see the beauty and the greatness of everything. And George King answered that for me. I love to say that the secret of King Yoga is love. I mean, there's that wonderful, piece in his one of his books, Visit the Logos of Earth. But he's having an audience with the protectors of the Lords of the Flame, and he asks of them, "Why do you do it? Why do you do it? Why do you sacrifice yourself in this way?" And the answer which comes back to him is, "Why do you do it in your own way? Why do you do it? Why did the adepts do it?" It's all love. And it's an awakening of what love is, and we're told again in the nine freedoms, in the ninth freedom, we're told we do not know what love is until we enter the gates of the sun. That's the essence. That's the driving force. That's something that's within each and every one of us. That's what's through in everything. It's what it all is. So I think, coming back to joining the staff, it's certainly that which drove me, because love, coming out of this bravery, this determination, inevitably leads to service. It's just the inevitable consequence, as outlined in the nine freedoms.
Well, thanks for
So you
sharing
got
that.
me a
That
bit
really
teared up, Jack. I do get
no,
teared up.
that's great. That's what makes you such a great. I listen to all your sermons. I've just been on your website listening to the latest one, and that was the conundrum we all face. That was about the third. Was that about the third
Blessed
lesson?
are they who love. Yeah, it's what the whole gamut is about, and it's. I mean, I I'm at that stage where it emotionally affects me. I look forward to the time when I can look upon it without it, emotionally affecting me in that way. But because it's something that I've been able to harness more, stand on. I'm not there yet.
It makes you
I'm
such a
getting
great prayer,
getting
dynamic
there.
prayer. Yeah. That's the we're told that Dr. King always many people are I heard that many people asked him over the years, "It's okay for you, you don't feel that pain or you don't feel that emotion
Right.
because you're
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
great master." But actually it's more.
He feels it more. They feel it more. They feel, yeah, absolutely. In the Master Aetherius says, I think, somewhere about, if you saw a child knocked down or whatever. I mean, we feel this, far more than you do. Yes, it does become like that. Um, I'm going
Yeah.
to assume.
Yeah, I would really like to become a staff member, but it feels like that now that I have a child, that doesn't it's prohibitive a bit. That level of commitment that you've done and you've sacrificed, you haven't
Right,
gone down that
right.
road.
I mean, one of the things, one of the many things Master said, but I mean, a metaphysical person is also a very practical person, and and you've got to take your other responsibilities. I mean, you can't, be a terrible thing to somewhat abandon your child, and you've got to find the right balance and all of that. And you'll know what that is.
Mm. Yeah, no, I hope that I can be of service with in my own way. because people have, like, you're on the missions team, you're on the task forces, and you're doing, and the Aetherius Society. It's another thing about getting the perspective is that you see how well it's designed. It can have such a huge influence with such a small group of people. An amazing manipulation.
The missions are so. Again, this is something I think that it needs time and distance to be able to put them into more of a rightful perspective. Um, are literally what's holding our world together. These cosmic missions, either given to George King or in Operation Sunbeam and Operation Prayer Power missions, and Operation Space Power 2, you could say, that he created, are so important. I mean, there's the statement from the master Aetherius in August of 1990 when he said, in the future it has to be the missions first, spreading the teaching second, and everything else after that. I hope it'll never come to a case where all we're doing in the Aetherius Society is the missions, and it's not easy spreading the teachings, but it's vital for the whole world that we continue to do these cosmic missions, and to do them not just sort of blindly or blandly, but to do them with that greater sense of realization and appreciation of their importance, their significance. That I think that's incumbent upon us all, really, to 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 develop this far greater appreciation of how incredible and fantastic they are, miraculous, you could almost say, and to perform them with that incredible sense of privilege, responsibility, these things, and I think that helps bring them to life, and I think it gives them a magic. The more that we do appreciate, another thing I think we tend to overwhelmingly misappreciate because we don't really understand it, but it's the importance of satellite number 3. Satellite number 3 is so incredibly precious, valuable. A couple of things on that. Of course, the master came up with Operation Sunbeam, giving energy to the logos of Earth, this essential manipulation that all planetary species really need to make. But he said in 1978, when he learned that because of all his efforts made in Operation Sunbeam, that it had enabled satellite number 3 to come into orbit for an extra 167 days. And in a lecture about that, he said, even if satellite number 3 had only been able to come into orbit for an extra 10 days or even 7 days, it still would have been worth all the efforts, which were primarily his own efforts, in
Really?
Operation Sunbeam. Yeah. And I only fairly recently found out the date of this transmission. It's a favorite transmission published in the book You Are Responsible. I thankfully was given permission to republish it in Maya Mire. It's from the master Aetherius, when he says the evolution of mankind is now being speeded up in order to reach a certain point at a certain time limit. Cooperate with the speeding up, help it, become the beings who speed it up, and I promise you a million helpers. That's the gist of it. Well, I found out because in the book You Are Responsible, it doesn't give the date, which is kind of strange and slightly annoying. But I found a copy of it a year or two ago, and I saw it was dated November the 24th, November the 28th, 1954, before the Aetherius Society had actually been formally established. But it was given by the Master Aetherius about 6 months before satellite number 3 first came into orbit of Earth. And I think, when the Master Aetherius said the evolution of mankind is now being speeded up, when he said that 6 months before, he would have known that satellite number 3 was coming into orbit. Guys, this is going to be a big game changer for your whole planet. And, at this age that we're now living in, some people refer to it as the exponential age, simply because everything is going exponential. And I think a very big part of that is the presence of satellite number 3. And you can look at it, with technology and so many other things that have literally gone exponential. is because of satellite number 3. Satellite number 3 is so important, and as I, it is so precious, so valuable. So to take these periods, these spiritual pushes, with a sort of greater understanding and appreciation of what they're about, and to use the time better. And it's very easy for me to sit here and say that it's a matter of I'm doing it myself, but it's a growing realization.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love to hear, because also from Richard Lawrence does it a lot. Addresses for July the 8th, or when there's a big commemoration. There've been people like you have been thinking about the teachings for so long, and doing so many practices and raising your consciousness, and you digest these things for us. And reading the book, I've just done my temple degree when I was in London,
Well, what's
and the
that?
book really, yeah, it really helps, because you have pages on each of the teaching, each of the missions, sorry, and even something like Operation Blue Water. And you, even one mission that you don't perform anymore because Dr. King has done it. Thank you for the
Right.
saved the San Andreas Fault from moving, and saved the whole of the west coast of America from being
Operation
under.
Blue Water again was huge. I mean, it was
Yeah,
off the charts in its importance. All of these things have been, in a way, they're all far too big for us to rightfully comprehend. Certainly, at this stage in our evolution, I mean, I think Mars 6 or the master Aetherius, or maybe our master, it doesn't really matter, but says, we'll be studying the 9 freedoms for hundreds, if not thousands of years. I mean, I've read that, you know.
yeah,
No, it's appreciating these things. And operation. But for me, if I was to cite the sort of the two most important factors in this whole human evolutionary story, and I might be out on a limb here, and I might be in left field, and I might be wrong, and all of those are perfectly acceptable. But for me, the two game changers, one is Maldek. If we really want to get down to the nitty gritty of what really matters, what's really important, that one of those is Maldek. Mal was so consequential, not just for us, but for the whole system. I mean, the masters teach us that, do a prayer, and it doesn't just affect yourself and those around you or the object of your prayer. That action affects the whole world. That it affects the whole solar system, and in a tiny way, it affects the whole galaxy, as does everything. I mean, and again, sort of, when you come back into that, it's all oneness. I mean, everything is of significance. Everything has purpose. Nothing is separate from the whole, if you like. And Maldek was something so vast, so consequential, the destruction of a planet, the destruction of a world. Um, and, well, let me give the other one for me. The other one for me is something that I give credit to my great friend and colleague, Dave Capraro, the organizer here at the Eastern USA branch, because he's very into these things, is Laniakea. I'd never heard of Laniakea. I mean, most people haven't heard of Laniakea. When people ask me what's going on, I like to reply Laniakea. And of course, they give me a blank stare. Laniakea is a lovely Hawaiian word, which means immense heaven. And it describes a super cluster of galaxies towards which this Milky Way, and I think about 100,000 other galaxies in this sector of the universe, are moving towards at phenomenal and accelerating speed. That's what's really going on. That's what this divine movement, this dance in going back to God means at the other end of the spectrum. That's what's really going on. We're part of this solar system, part of this galaxy, with how many, goodness knows how many other solar systems in this galaxy, together with over 100,000 other galaxies moving towards Laniakea. It's a dance. It's utterly sublime. And yet, at the other end of the spectrum, we've got Maldek, which sort of didn't just slow us down, and it didn't just slow the Mother Earth down, it slowed this whole solar system down. And one would, can certainly almost really presume that it slowed this whole galaxy down. It was so consequential. We are an intricate part of everything on this, vast cosmic scale. So, as I say, Maldek was huge, Lania Kale is huge, and we're somewhere between the two. We're far closer to Maldek, actually.
They're all huge. We talk about planetary. The whole conversation, I'm going to have to come down afterwards and sit in a dark room for a bit just to bring my vibrations down. But this has been, I think we're almost at the end of the show here, Paul, and I just want to finish with some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, so I give terribly long-winded answers, I'm afraid, Jack. But you ask such penetrating questions.
Credit, no, I think the credit goes to you. So, what initially drew you to Dr. George King's teachings in the 1980s?
Their resonance of truth, and profundity, and
Can you
urgency.
describe? Okay, yeah. And how has your life changed? How has your life changed since dedicating yourself to Dr. King's spiritual work?
Well, instead of me sort of meandering this way and that and becoming a bit of a lost soul, it's given me direction and purpose.
And can you sum up, of all the teachings and the principles of society, can you sum up what are the core principles?
The core principles of the Aetherius Society, that your life has tremendous value and significance and importance. You're here for a reason. We're all here for a reason. It's a great reason. It's a sublime reason. Go and find that reason. And if it doesn't lead you into greater love and service and realization, then you probably still haven't found it. It's about love. It's about service. It's about realization.
So you were with Dr. King for the last 3 years of his life, almost every day. Can you share one of the most memorable anecdotes or experiences from your time then?
It was all special. You could, in a way, you couldn't separate this experience from taking a drop out of the ocean. Being in the ocean was the experience. Being in the presence of Maya, who was so humble, don't take this in the wrong way, but was so ordinary and yet profoundly great at the same time. And you only needed to sort of be standing in front of him and talking to him and looking into his eyes. You knew that he wasn't ordinary.
The book covers so many of Dr. King's missions, and he's the master for the Aquarian age, and words don't do value. But what do you believe is the most important aspect of his legacy?
Seek truth. Seek truth and live truth. Or as he puts it in his own motto, choose well, stand fast, know God. So seek truth, choose well, and having sought it and it resonates, stand by it, and you will know God.
Yeah, Nana Yoga was his favorite yoga. Right?
I think he had many favorite yogas. You could call him a bhakti yogi. Yes, for sure, because you can't really have one without the other.
No. How do you think Dr. King's teachings are relevant to the challenges we face in today's world?
Nothing is more relevant. We have to go to the source of the problem. Politicians try and fix it, economists try and fix it, sociologists try and fix it, psychologists try and fix it. All these different people try and fix it. It's a spiritual. We have a spiritual crisis because we've lost that connection with us, with who we are, and our connection, innate divine connection with the cosmos. It's a spiritual problem. That's the teachings of the Aetherius Society address that, fundamentally first and foremost, that enable everything else to fall into place.
And what do you hope readers will take away from the book?
A sense of joy, a sense of inspiration, a sense of meaning and purpose, with a will and a determination to take this all to the next step.
How do you respond to skeptics who might question the validity of Dr. King's claims?
Look deeper. look deeper, investigate it. Okay, fine, I understand. Listen, I was skeptical when you hear about someone saying Jesus communicated through them or whatever else, and beings from other worlds. You have to take us, be reasonably skeptical of that initially, but you've got to look into it. Look into it. If it's, if you are remotely curious, some people aren't remotely curious. Well, good luck to them. But I think anybody who does care, coming back to care, who is concerned about the world and life and the meaning and purpose of one's life, then look deeper. And I think when you do, one will no longer be skeptical or doubtful. One will have found.
That's a great answer, yeah. So we talked about the missions of the society, only need a small team for that. But how do you see the future direction of the work Dr. King started in the Aetherius Society?
You're asking me on today, and I'm not that optimistic. I have a nasty feeling, I hope it's not a correct feeling, but a nasty feeling that the world is going to have to sort of, I don't want to say destroy itself, I don't think it'll need to go that far, but something devastating I think needs to happen before the world will take these teachings seriously, whatever form that may take. It may take, sightings of UFOs. They've been dabbling at these sightings, and they're Congress at least is U.S. Congress is at least asking questions about them and taking it somewhat seriously, but they're asking pretty sort of shallow questions about it all. In my mind, humanity needs to be shocked. Humanity needs a shock. Hopefully, that won't come as a terrible shock, as in a nuclear war kind of a shock. And we're quite
Yeah.
close. Hopefully, it'll be something of a manifestation of extraterrestrial beings that shocks us into a way almost of numbness. I'm thinking that it may have to be something like that, because otherwise I think we're just going to sort of, to our great shame and discredit, kind of ignore these
Do you think that's in
teachings.
the cosmic plan, that the karma of humanity is improved to such a point that is enabled
I
to
think
happen?
the cosmic plan, is the second part of the subtitle of the book, is the dawning of a new world, and there will be a dawning of a new world, and those who are ready to embrace this far greater reality from a sort of karmic evolutionary point of view will remain.
Obviously, we hope the new master doesn't come next year. We hope longer, because it gives more time for more people to evolve. But a sighting like some, we
Yeah,
had the Phoenix Lights,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you need to come on the White House lawn. You're saying?
yeah. Well, I think they could do that. I think they don't do that, very briefly, because I think that would lead to lawlessness and rioting and chaos, and I think that the cosmic masters know that that would be the
Mm.
outcome. A speculation, but it's my answer as to why we don't get something like that.
Okay. Hopefully, people are inspired to buy the book. If they want to get involved with the Aetherius Society, how would you recommend that they? What next steps can they take?
We'll go to the website, of course, satirists.org, and pick up, one or two of the books, or listen to some of the lectures. The books, obviously, to begin with, would be The Nine Freedoms and the 12 Blessings. Hopefully, Maya Mire gives a pretty good overview. Take it bit by bit. We've got online services, but sort of just see what resonates with oneself, and we all come in by different threads. So find the thread that's right for you.
Thank you. I think the book really helps a lot of people, and I know a lot of members have read it as well. And they're, because you were at the end there with our master.
I was, and it was a wonderful privilege. For anyone who has read the book and is listening to this, and I'm going to ask if you would give a review on Amazon, because that helps with algorithms and things like that. It's very
Well,
hard. There's so many people who not only getting books published by publishers, but are publishing their own books, that you know things can sort of get lost in the crowd. But hey, if it's meant to get out into the world, then it will. But anybody, as I say, who has read it and liked it, please give it a
mm.
review.
Yeah, it's a wonderful to hear such a heartfelt piece of literature. It's really and the most amazing to me is it's so thin. It could have easily
Like
your
thin
Bible.
books. I'm terrible with thick books, Jack. I can't read thick books. I like thin books. You know, one way I like to describe this book, believe it or not, although after hearing this interview, people might understand why. To me, it's a love story.
Mm,
It's a romance. I mean, as strange as it may seem, but in fact, it's all love. I mean, it's an expression of my own love, you know, for God, for life, obviously for the master and the whole Aetherius society. That in a way, I'm not saying they should put it into the romance category on the bookshelf, but yeah, it has that. I like to look at it in that, or that's how I feel about it.
no, beautiful. My computer's running out of hard space here, so I think we're gonna have to wind up, or I won't be able to do my
Well, thank you,
beautiful
Jack.
outro where I talk again to the listeners to say, please share this. Please write comments in the links box below, and you can get Paul's book. Is it available from the Aetherius website? Where's the best website to get it
It's
from?
available from the Aetherius Society website, aetherius.org, and otherwise, dare I say, from Amazon.
But I invite people to go to your website. And what's the name of the website again?
My
Sediment of My
website
Soul.
is sedimentofmysoul.com. Yeah, it's another title that came to me when I was out on my bicycle
Yeah.
many years ago.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Paul. This has been really wonderful.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate
And I'll
it.
see you later. Till
Bye
next
bye.
time. Bye bye. Great. Thanks, Paul.